It was a cool Tuesday morning when Alex stepped off the bus, adjusting the collar of his freshly pressed suit, ready for what could be the most important day of his life. He had spent the last few weeks preparing for this job interview, studying the company's history, tailoring his resume, and practicing his pitch in front of the mirror until he had it down to the smallest detail. But now, standing outside the sleek glass building of the tech company he dreamed of working for, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. There was no one there to share in his excitement, no family or friends to send him off with encouragement. It was just him alone, feeling both the weight and the anticipation of the moment. As he walked through the revolving doors and into the lobby, the silence around him seemed almost deafening. The place was impressive, pristine, everything he had imagined it would be. But the towering glass walls, the minimalist decor, and the polished floors only made him feel more out of place. He wasn't surrounded by support, and he wasn't even sure if he truly belonged here. He was just one of many hopeful applicants with nothing but his nerves and determination to carry him through. Sitting down in the waiting area, Alex tried to calm his racing heart. He could feel the eyes of other candidates on him, some of them already chatting with one another, looking confident. His own hands, however, were clammy, and his mind kept replaying worst-case scenarios. What if they didn't like him? What if his nerves showed through? The interview was still minutes away, but it already felt like a lifetime. The clock ticked, and the longer he waited, the heavier the silence felt. But then, just as he was starting to doubt himself, the door to the office opened with a soft creak, and standing in the doorway was the CEO. He hadn't expected to meet him today. Certainly not in the lobby, and certainly not this soon. But there he was, looking right at Alex, with a warm smile. The man's presence seemed to cut through the tension in the room like a knife through butter. And for the first time that morning, Alex felt like someone actually saw him, not just another face in the crowd. Alex sat in the waiting area, his palms clammy against the edges of the crisp, laminated chair. The room was clean, sleek, and modern, but all its polished surfaces only seemed to emphasize how out of place he felt. He had dressed carefully, choosing the sharpest suit he owned, but it didn't seem to matter now. He still couldn't shake the anxiety twisting in his stomach. Every candidate here seemed so much more put together than he felt inside, even if they were just as nervous. The quiet hum of whispered conversations around him only made his sense of isolation stronger. It wasn't that he didn't believe in himself. He had worked hard to get here after all. But there was something about this place, this moment, that made him question everything. His resume was flawless. His interview prep had been meticulous, running through mock interviews with friends who tried to ease his nerves but only added more pressure with their well-meaning encouragements. The research was done. He had everything on paper, but there was still this gnawing sense of doubt. He looked around the room, catching glimpses of others bright-eyed, chatting casually, their voices easy and confident, as if they didn't have the same knot of tension in their chests. A young woman sitting across from him was flipping through her portfolio, occasionally glancing up with a calm, collected air. A man nearby checked his phone for the 10th time, his posture confident, even a bit cocky. The chatter seemed to have a rhythm, a social ease that Alex could never quite master. He had always been more reserved, a little too focused on the details. He wasn't good at small talk, at making connections on the fly. It was a stark contrast to the loneliness Alex had felt for most of his life. Growing up, his family had never been particularly close. His parents had always been busy, and the conversations they had were rarely about anything beyond the necessary logistics of life. He had learned to be self-reliant, but sometimes, like now, it felt as though that self-reliance came at the cost of something vital: human connection. Alex's thoughts wandered to his childhood, to the times when he had longed for the kind of easy camaraderie his peers seemed to have, a camaraderie that made him feel like he belonged. He had always been an outsider, the quiet observer in the corner of every social group, unsure of how to bridge the gap. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his reverie. It was a message from his best friend Jamie. "You've got this, man. Remember all the prep you did. They'd be lucky to have you." Alex smiled faintly at the words, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Jamie's support had always been there, always on the other side of a text or a phone call. But it felt distant now. They had met at university, shared late-night study sessions, and had become a solid support system for each other. Yet Jamie had his own life, now his own path. He wasn't there in the room with Alex, sharing the weight of the moment. And somehow, that made all the difference. Alex tucked the phone back into his pocket and took a deep breath. He had to stop dwelling on the loneliness. He had worked too hard for this moment to let self-doubt take over. He had prepared, studied, and visualized success. Now it was time to put all of that into action. He could do this. But the fear remained bubbling under the surface. What if it wasn't enough? What if they saw through him? What if, despite all his preparation, he still didn't belong? A soft chime from the door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. The interview was about to begin. Alex was called into a sleek conference room, a minimalist space with large windows that looked out over the city. The interview panel, composed of 3 senior executives, were already seated at the long glass table. They didn't seem to pay much attention as Alex entered, their eyes fixed on the papers in front of them. He tried to steady his breath, feeling the familiar tightness in his chest return. "Please have a seat." One of the executives, a middle-aged woman with glasses, gestured toward the empty chair across from them. Alex nodded, stepping forward, his hands clammy as they gripped the edges of the chair. He could feel their eyes on him as he settled into his seat, trying to project confidence despite the storm of anxiety churning inside. The questions started immediately: what drew him to the company, what his long-term career goals were, how he would handle certain challenges. The panelists asked with practiced precision, each question carefully designed to test his knowledge, his ability to think under pressure, and his fit for the role. Alex had anticipated most of the questions. He was prepared. He was ready. But as he answered, he noticed something strange. The silence in the room seemed heavier, as if each word he spoke was scrutinized with a piercing intensity. His nerves, already stretched thin, began to fray at the edges. He could feel his heart pounding louder in his chest, his words becoming slightly less steady with every question. Was he doing well? Was he saying the right things? Just as he was trying to regain his composure, the door to the conference room opened. Alex's eyes flicked toward it instinctively, but he wasn't prepared for what he saw. The CEO of the company, a tall figure dressed in a dark, tailored suit, entered the room. His presence seemed to shift the air itself. There was no mistaking who he was. Even in the absence of introductions, it was obvious. The CEO's sharp features, confident posture, and the quiet authority with which he moved were enough to make everyone else in the room sit up straighter, as if collectively holding their breath. "Is this the candidate for the senior position?" The CEO's voice was deep, calm, and commanding, and he addressed the panel, though his eyes never left Alex. "Yes, Mr. Carter. This is Alex, our final candidate," the woman with glasses replied, sounding almost surprised at his sudden arrival. The CEO's gaze finally moved to Alex, locking eyes with him. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had read about Mr. Carter, the tech mogul who had built the company from the ground up, known for his sharp business acumen and visionary leadership. He had seen photos of him in magazines, heard his name mentioned in business circles, but he had never expected to be in the same room as him, and certainly not like this in the middle of his interview. Mr. Carter. Alex stammered, standing slightly from his chair out of instinct, though the CEO waved him back down with a gesture. "No need to stand, Alex," Mr. Carter said with a hint of a smile. "Please continue with your interview. I'm just here to see what kind of person we're considering for a position in this company." His words were smooth, but there was an edge to them that made Alex feel like he was being sized up in a way that went beyond the usual interview questions. Alex, trying to steady his nerves, cleared his throat. The sudden shift in the room's energy had thrown him off balance, but he had to recover, had to keep his composure. This was his shot. The CEO walked over to the side of the room, leaning against the wall casually, arms crossed as he observed. The executive, still silent, seemed to defer to him in a way that made Alex feel both awed and intimidated. The questions from the panel continued, but Alex couldn't help but feel that each one now carried more weight. Mr. Carter's presence loomed over them like a constant reminder that this wasn't just any interview. The stakes were higher. The pressure was real. After a few more moments, the CEO finally spoke again. "You know, Alex, I've been listening in. I appreciate the effort you've put into your answers. But I want to ask you something a little more personal." Alex swallowed hard, his palms slick against the arms of the chair. "Of course, Mr. Carter, I'm happy to answer anything." "What drives you?" Mr. Carter asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You've prepared for this. You're qualified. But in the end, it's not just about skills. It's about heart. What makes you tick? What keeps you going when things get tough?" Alex was taken aback for a moment. The question was simple, yet it felt like the kind of question that could determine everything. For a moment, he couldn't find his words. He had spent so much time trying to be the perfect candidate on paper that he hadn't considered how to answer a question like this. But then something shifted. The anxiety that had gripped him suddenly seemed to loosen just a little. He took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "It's about making a real difference," he said, finding the words more easily. "Now it's about knowing that the work I do can leave a lasting impact not just on a company, but on the people it serves. I've always wanted to contribute something meaningful, something that matters." The CEO seemed to consider his words carefully, his gaze unwavering. There was a brief silence before Mr. Carter gave a small nod. "Good answer," he said, his voice quieter now, more thoughtful. "Let's see where this goes." The air in the room seemed to shift again, but this time it was lighter. The tension that had been building dissolved just a little, and Alex felt for the first time since entering the building a spark of hope. Maybe this wasn't just a job interview. Maybe it was an opportunity to prove himself not just on paper, but as a person. And with that, the interview continued, but it no longer felt like a test he was bound to fail. It felt like a chance to show who he truly was. The room, which had once felt sterile and distant, now seemed warmer, somehow more personal. The tension that had once gripped Alex's chest began to loosen, and the intimidating presence of the CEO, Mr. Carter, felt less like a looming obstacle and more like an opportunity to truly connect. After the initial formalities of the interview resumed, the atmosphere shifted. Instead of the usual rapid-fire questions, the conversation took on a more organic, relaxed tone. Mr. Carter, still standing by the window, now leaned slightly against the wall with his arms crossed, listening with a subtle intensity His earlier professional demeanor had softened, and Alex noticed for the first time that there was a genuine curiosity in his eyes, a sense that this wasn't just about whether Alex was qualified for the job. It was about understanding who he really was. "Tell me something." Mr. Carter's voice cut through Alex's thoughts, the question unexpected but genuine. "What's something that you've struggled with, something you had to overcome to get where you are now?" Alex's breath caught in his throat. It was an oddly personal question for an interview, and yet there was something about the way Mr. Carter asked it that made Alex feel safe enough to answer honestly. He shifted in his chair, gathering his thoughts, unsure of where to start. "Well," Alex began slowly, "I think it's fair to say that I've struggled with self-doubt my entire life." He paused, feeling the weight of his own words, but it felt good to say them aloud. "I grew up in a family where success was expected, but it was always a bit of a solo journey for me. I didn't have a lot of support or guidance, and I often felt like I was carrying that weight alone." There was a brief silence as Mr. Carter studied him, his expression neutral but attentive. The other executives at the table had stopped speaking, and for the first time Alex felt like he had the full attention of the room, not because of his qualifications, but because of something more personal. "I get that," Mr. Carter said, his voice softer than before. "I think everyone in this room knows what it feels like to carry the weight of expectations, to feel like you're constantly measuring up to someone else's standards." He glanced at the panel briefly, as if sharing an unspoken understanding with them. "I had my share of challenges too early on. Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to realize that the only person you really need to answer to is yourself." Alex nodded, feeling a strange sense of kinship with the CEO. In that moment, the gap between them, the billionaire tech mogul and the nervous, unsure candidate, seemed to shrink just a little. It was as though Mr. Carter wasn't just looking for a candidate who could answer questions correctly. He was looking for someone he could relate to, someone who understood what it took to rise above adversity. For the next few minutes, the conversation flowed more easily, the questions less formal, and more like a genuine exchange between two people. Trying to understand each other, Mr. Carter asked about Alex's values, his perspective on leadership, and what motivated him on a deeper level, not just in terms of career goals, but in life itself. The CEO seemed to listen intently, his eyes never straying from Alex's face, as if he were searching for something beyond surface-level responses. Alex, in turn, found himself opening up in ways he hadn't anticipated. He shared his passion for innovation, for using technology to create positive change, and how his experience working on projects that impacted real people had solidified his desire to contribute to a bigger cause. He even found himself laughing lightly at some of the awkward, less polished moments in his career. Moments where things didn't go as planned but still taught him valuable lessons. Through it all, Alex felt a sense of connection, something he had never expected from an interview, let alone with someone of Mr. Carter's stature. It wasn't just about the technicalities anymore, about proving his worth with polished answers. It was about sharing a genuine conversation, one that was rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and a shared recognition of the challenges both of them had faced to get where they were. At some point during the conversation, the panelists seemed to fade into the background, their presence no longer dominating the room. It felt as though it was just Alex and Mr. Carter sitting across from each other, sharing their stories. And for the first time, Alex felt like he belonged in this space, not just because of his qualifications, but because of the person he was becoming. Mr. Carter leaned forward slightly, his voice now a little more intimate. "I've been in your shoes," he said, his tone surprisingly humble. I've sat where you are filled with self-doubt, wondering if I could really make it. But what I've learned is that you don't get ahead by trying to be someone else or by meeting someone else's expectations. You succeed by being unapologetically yourself, by trusting your instincts, and by embracing the struggles you've been through as part of your story. Alex's heart raced. Was the CEO of this company really telling him this? Was he really being seen for more than just his resume? I know it's not easy, Mr. Carter continued, but I believe in the people who have the courage to be authentic. And I think that's what sets the great ones apart. It's not about perfection, it's about resilience. You have that resilience, Alex. Alex's chest tightened with emotion, and for a moment he couldn't speak. The validation was overwhelming, but in the best way. He had never imagined this moment, this human, authentic exchange would happen during a job interview. It felt like a pivotal moment in his life, one that he would look back on, no matter what the outcome of the interview was. Thank you, Alex. Finally managed to say, his voice thick with gratitude. That means more than you know. Mr. Carter smiled a genuine smile that lit up his face. You're welcome. Now let's see if we can take that resilience and put it to good use. As the conversation wound down, the feeling of connection lingered in the air, warmer and more solid than any handshake or formal gesture of approval. Alex had come into this interview expecting to prove his worth. What he hadn't expected was to feel seen, truly seen, not just as a candidate, but as a person. And in that moment, he knew something had changed. No matter what happened next, he felt ready. He felt stronger. More importantly, he felt connected. By the time the conversation shifted back to the formal interview questions, Alex felt a change in himself. The initial rush of nerves, that gut-wrenching anxiety he had felt when he first walked into the room, had dissipated. In its place was a calm, steady focus that he hadn't experienced before. It was as though Mr. Carter's words had unlocked something within him, a confidence that Alex didn't even know he possessed. His thoughts no longer felt cluttered or rushed. Instead, he found himself thinking clearly, responding with ease. The tightness in his chest had loosened, and his breathing, which had been shallow and quick now, flowed steadily, matching the rhythm of the conversation. The questions kept coming, but they no longer felt like a test. They felt like an exchange, like a conversation between two people, not just an interviewer and an interviewee. Alex answered each question with more assurance, his voice steady and the words flowing more naturally. He wasn't second-guessing himself anymore. Every answer seemed to reflect his true thoughts, not the rehearsed lines he had mentally prepared before arriving. Mr. Carter didn't interrupt him as he had before. He simply listened, nodding occasionally, giving Alex the space to fully articulate his thoughts. The other executives on the panel had stopped scribbling furiously on their notepads, and for the first time they were watching him, really watching him. There was no more pressure to impress them with polished answers. It was clear that they were simply interested in the person behind the resume. At one point, one of the executives, a woman with sharp features who had asked several of the tough questions earlier, leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady but not intimidating Alex. I've been listening to you, and I can tell that you're not just skilled. You have a way of thinking that goes beyond what's written in your CV. Tell me, how do you deal with failure? How do you cope when things don't go according to plan? The question was a familiar one in interviews, but this time it didn't feel daunting. Alex didn't hesitate as he spoke. Failure is part of the process. He said, his voice calm but firm. It's inevitable, and I've learned to see it as an opportunity rather than something to fear. When things go wrong, I take a step back, analyze what went wrong, and then figure out how I can improve. But most importantly, I don't let it define me. I see it as a stepping stone, not a setback, Mr. Carter smiled at his answer, a slight nod of approval ensued. He said, "That's exactly the mindset we value here. Resilience is key in any role, but especially in leadership." The rest of the interview felt like a natural extension of this newfound ease. Alex found himself answering questions with a sense of clarity, sharing his thoughts and experiences without the fear of judgment or rejection that had plagued him in the beginning. It wasn't about impressing anyone anymore. It was about being authentic, being true to himself. And as the questions continued, he realized that the only person he was trying to impress now was himself. For the first time in a long while, Alex didn't feel like he had to perform. He wasn't worried about how he appeared or whether he was giving the right answer. He simply responded as himself. This wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about proving to himself that he had the strength to face any challenge, that he was worthy of the opportunities that came his way. As the interview progressed, the panelists began to ask more specific questions related to the role, questions that tested his technical expertise and understanding of the company's goals. But Alex no longer felt intimidated by them. He answered each question with confidence, his mind sharp and clear. He didn't have to reach for answers. They were already there waiting for him. There was a moment when Mr. Carter asked a particularly difficult question, one that required Alex to think on his feet. It was a scenario-based question asking him how he would handle a complex business situation involving high stakes and multiple stakeholders. Normally, this would have thrown Alex off balance, but instead he took a deep breath, visualized the problem, and gave a thoughtful response. The panel was silent for a moment, processing his answer. Finally, the woman who had asked him the question spoke. Impressive, she said, her voice genuine. That was exactly how we would approach it here. Very strategic. Alex felt a surge of pride. The validation was not just from the answer itself, but from the fact that he had answered without hesitation. He had trusted his instincts, and it had paid off. By the time the interview neared its end, Alex realized that the nervousness he had felt at the beginning was entirely gone. The CEO, Mr. Carter, gave him a final look, his expression thoughtful. "Alex, I have to say I'm impressed," he said. "You've handled yourself exceptionally well today. Not only do you have the qualifications, but you've demonstrated something far more important, the ability to stay grounded and think clearly under pressure. That's the kind of person we need here." The words hit Alex with a surprising force. He hadn't expected such direct praise from someone of Mr. Carter's stature, and hearing it now at the end of the interview was a moment of validation that was far more meaningful than any technical answer he could have given. As the interview wrapped up, Mr. Carter stood up and extended his hand, his grip firm but warm. "Thank you for your time, Alex," he said with a smile. "We'll be in touch soon." Alex shook his hand, still processing the weight of the conversation. As he made his way to the door, the feeling of anxiety and self-doubt that had plagued him earlier was nowhere to be found. For the first time in the interview, he felt proud, not because he had impressed anyone, but because he had shown up as himself. And in that moment, he knew that whatever the outcome of the interview was, he had already won. As the interview drew to a close, Alex's mind was racing. The tension that had gripped him at the beginning had completely evaporated. The conversation with Mr. Carter, the CEO, had left him feeling grounded, seen, and even inspired. But despite the positive energy in the room, he knew that the hardest part was yet to come, the waiting. "Thank you for your time, Alex," Mr. Carter said, standing up and extending his hand. "It's been a pleasure speaking with you today." Alex took the CEO's hand, his own grip firm, yet filled with the residual warmth of the moment. "Thank you for the opportunity," he replied, his voice steady, though a part of him still felt the lingering anticipation. "I appreciate your time and the conversation." The panelists nodded in unison, their expressions all more relaxed now, acknowledging Alex's responses. The woman who had asked him the question about failure gave him a small, approving smile. As Alex walked toward the door, he caught a glimpse of Mr. Carter, looking at him thoughtfully, as if weighing something in his mind. When Alex stepped out into the hallway, the heavy wooden door clicked shut behind him. The feeling of being both seen and heard lingered in his chest, but the reality set in soon after. The hardest part wasn't just the interview itself. It was the unknown that lay ahead. He had no idea if he had said the right things, if he had answered their questions in a way that would guarantee a second meeting, or if they were truly considering him for the role. The next few days passed slowly, with Alex replaying every moment of the interview in his mind. He spent hours scrutinizing his answers, trying to gauge whether he had said anything that could have cost him the job. But at the same time, there was a quiet voice inside him that kept reminding him that he had done his best, that he had presented himself honestly. He had spoken from the heart, and that was something no one could take away from him. Then, on the fourth day after the interview, as Alex was sitting at his desk, the email notification pinged on his phone. His heart skipped a beat as he quickly tapped the screen, half expecting a form rejection letter. But as he opened the email, his eyes scanned the words with disbelief. "Dear Alex, we are pleased to inform you that after careful consideration, we would like to extend an offer to you for the position of Senior Project Manager at Global Innovations. Your interview demonstrated not only your qualifications, but also a rare level of authenticity and resilience that aligns with the core values of our company. We were impressed by your strategic thinking ability to remain grounded under pressure and your passion for innovation. Please find the details of the offer attached. We are excited about the possibility of having you join our team and look forward to your response. Best regards, Mr. Carter, CEO, Global Innovations." For a moment, Alex couldn't move. The words seemed to blur together as he read the email again, making sure he wasn't imagining it. The offer, his first real job offer in his field, had come. It wasn't just an offer for any role, but for the exact position he had dreamed of since he first set foot in the tech industry. His fingers hovered over his phone as he fought to keep the emotions in check. This was more than just a job offer. It was a validation of everything he had worked for, a confirmation that he was capable, that he could succeed, that he had finally found a place where he could truly make a difference. The offer was a reflection of the effort he had put in, the sacrifices he had made, and the person he had become in the process. It was a moment of reckoning, a culmination of years of struggles, failures, and small victories. Alex sat back in his chair, a smile creeping onto his face as the reality of the situation began to sink in. He could feel the weight of all the late nights, the uncertainty and the self-doubt melting away. He had done it. He had finally reached a place where he could take the next step in his career with a company that saw more in him than just his resume. After a moment of contemplation, Alex took a deep breath and tapped out a response, his fingers moving steadily across the screen. He felt a sense of gratitude, of humility, as he typed the words that would set the course for the next chapter of his life. "Dear Mr. Carter, thank you so much for the offer. I am truly honored by the opportunity to join Global Innovations and be part of such an exciting team. I am eager to contribute to the company's mission and to continue growing both professionally and personally. I am thrilled to accept the offer and look forward to working with you and the entire team. Best regards, Alex." When he hit send, it was as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. The decision was made, and with it, the first step toward his future had been taken. The next day, Alex received a phone call from Mr. Carter himself. Alex, I just wanted to personally congratulate you on accepting our offer, he said, his voice warm and sincere. We're excited to have you join the team, and I look forward to working with you closely. The call was brief, but it solidified everything Alex had been feeling since receiving the email. This wasn't just a job, it was a partnership, a chance to grow, to learn, and to contribute in ways he hadn't imagined before. As the conversation ended, Alex put down the phone, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he had found his place. The sense of uncertainty of being lost and adrift was gone. In its place was a quiet sense of peace. He had made it, and as the days passed, the excitement continued to build. Alex knew that this was just the beginning of something new, something that would stretch him in ways he hadn't yet imagined. But for now, he allowed himself to savor the moment he realized that hard work, resilience, and authenticity had finally paid off. As Alex sat back in his chair, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this moment, a wave of realization washed over him. He had spent so many years doubting himself, worrying about every misstep, every failure, and wondering if he was ever truly capable of achieving the success he dreamed of. But now, with the job offer in hand and the future unfolding before him, it was clear his path to success hadn't been linear, but it had been meaningful, and it had been his own. Looking back, Alex could pinpoint the moments when his self-doubt had nearly consumed him, when he had been ready to throw in the towel. But those were the moments that had shaped him, that had forced him to confront his insecurities and push beyond them. The interview had been the ultimate test, a culmination of everything he had learned about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of staying grounded in the face of adversity. The lesson that Alex had learned was clear success wasn't about being perfect, nor was it about impressing others with polished answers or flawless performance. It was about showing up as yourself, authentic, genuine, and unapologetically human. In the past, he had been consumed by the fear of failure, thinking that every mistake would define him. But he now understood that failure wasn't something to fear. It was a part of the journey, a necessary step toward growth. The real breakthrough came when he stopped trying to be someone else during the interview and started embracing who he was. When he let go of the pressure to impress and instead focused on being true to himself, the result was not just a job offer, but a deeper understanding of what success truly meant. It wasn't about fitting into a mold or living up to external expectations. It was about aligning his work with his values, his passion, and his vision for the future. As Alex thought about the people who had supported him along the way, the friends who had encouraged him during his darkest hours, the mentors who had guided him, and even the strangers who had pushed him to be better, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. None of this would have been possible without the lessons they had taught him. And while the job offer was a huge milestone, Alex knew it was only the beginning. The real success wasn't just getting the job, it was the journey he had taken to get there. The sense of success he felt now was not just the satisfaction of landing the role, but the peace that came with knowing he had grown. He had learned to trust himself, to lean into uncertainty, and to embrace challenges with a mindset of growth rather than fear. There would always be obstacles ahead, but Alex knew now that he had the resilience to overcome them. He wasn't the same person who had walked into that interview room. He was stronger, more self-assured, and ready for whatever came next. That night, as he sat quietly in his apartment reflecting on the offer and the future ahead, Alex felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had taken a leap of faith not just in the interview, but in himself. And for the first time in a long while, he was at peace with where he was in life. The future was full of possibilities, and he was ready to take the next step. Success, he realized, was not a destination. It was a mindset. It was the courage to continue, the humility to learn, and the willingness to stay true to yourself no matter what. As Alex looked forward to starting his new job, he felt ready to face the challenges ahead with a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. The journey wasn't over. It had only just begun.